What's going on, everyone? Today I'm going to show you how to install the latest version of Windows 11, which is Windows 11 build 23H2, aka Fall 2023 build. This build just came out October 31st of 2023. The new big build updates happen once a year for Windows 11. Love it or hate it, Windows 11 is the current version of Windows, which is still receiving feature updates. Windows 10 is still receiving security updates, but no new features are rolling out, as it will be considered end of life with no updates at all starting October of 2024. So the main purpose of this video is going to be to install Windows 11 23H2. However, if you have an older version of Windows 11 on your machine and you just want to force upgrade it to the latest and greatest version, then we can go over that real quick here. So first off, let's just show how to determine which build of Windows 11 you already have. And I'm showing this off on a Windows 10 machine. However, it's the same exact steps that you would do on a Windows 11 machine. So if you go down to the start icon in the bottom here, go ahead and just type in About, and then let's click on About Your PC. And then Version right here under Windows Specifications is going to show what your current version is. And one thing to note is the installed on date is kind of nonsense, as this changes periodically with updates. It's not the actual date that the computer's OS was actually installed on. So now that you can see which version you are on, then you can decide if you actually need to make the jump or not, or if you already have it. So let me go ahead and close this. So there's a few ways that you'll be able to make the jump to the latest and greatest version of Windows 11 23H2. One would be to go to Start, just type in Windows Updates. You can do check for updates, and then you can force it here, and then you can give it a second, and it may reveal that there is a new version of Windows 11 available. Of course, it would look a little bit different where the check for updates would be over on the right hand side here, but the same exact thing would happen. The big thing with 23H2, just like all other build updates, is that Microsoft does a slow release of them. So even if it says that it is not available, then there are other methods of forcing the update. And so if we close out of Windows updates here, so I'll have a link for everything that I show web-based in the description below. However, the main area that we'll be driving off of here is going to be the Windows Media Creation website here. So they have a Windows 10 version, and they also have the Windows 11 version. So of course, this is the Windows 11 version. And so one way to update to the latest and greatest version of Windows 11 is to go ahead and use the Windows 11 Installation Assistant. And if you're on a Windows 10 machine, you can also use this to do a direct in-place upgrade. And so if we go ahead and download this, and then we'll go up to the downloads section here, and I'll pop this open, and we can go ahead and kick this off. And of course, you will have to be an administrator of the machine in order to run any of this. And then it would pop up with the usual user agreement stuff, and you could click accept and install. And then it's going to start the download process, and then it would start the install process. That is, of course, if your machine meets the minimum requirements of Windows 11. So that's just to show you that. It does take a little bit of time, so just be patient. However, I do recommend that if you are doing an in-place upgrade from Windows 10 to 11, that the best method would be to do a clean install so that there are no orphan files and stuff like that. Generally, the machine will act faster too with a clean install. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this, and we'll cancel out of that. So for the sake of this video, I am going to show the bottom portions here of this website. So if we scroll down, we have two options here. One is that we can actually use the Windows Media Creation tool to create a bootable drive. And then there is also the other option of just downloading the ISO and utilizing another application to go ahead and create a bootable media device. So you could use something like Rufus or something of that sort once you've downloaded the ISO file here. For the sake of this video, I am going to use the Windows 11 installation media here, and then we are going to click on download now. So of course, one of the big things that we will need is you will need a USB thumb drive to be plugged in. And if we actually click on here, it'll state what the requirements are. And if we scroll down a little bit, so under the USB flash drive, it mentions that you need at least an 8 GB drive in order to actually create the bootable media from it. And I will have a recommended thumb drive linked in the description below if you don't have any on hand. So we'll scroll down here and then let's go ahead and click on download now. Then I am going to hunt this down. We'll fire this up. Yes. And what I like to do is close out of everything that you have open so that it's just the Windows 11 setup tool here. This is your user agreement. Just go ahead and accept that. Give it some more time of getting a few things ready. I usually leave the default here to keep this checked as use the recommended option for this PC. And this is basically setting the language and the addition of Windows 11. We'll click next. We are going down the USB flash drive route. And of course, once again, it says it needs to be at least 8 GB in size. So we'll hit next. And of course, if you have not already plugged in your USB thumb drive, go ahead and do so. And then you can click refresh drive list, and then it should hopefully see it for you here. In this case, it does see it as drive E, and the thumb drive is called data. We'll hit next, and now it's just going to say getting a few things ready. And then now we just give it some time and it's going to work its magic here. So I'll let this progress through, and when this is done, we will continue on. And of course, the speed of this can be very dependent on a number of things. It could be your internet connection, or it could be the speed of your thumb drive, and of course the speed of the computer itself. So just be patient during all of this. It could take some time. All right, so if all goes well, and you should see this page here, it says your USB flash drive is ready. If it errors at any point here, I would just recommend rebooting your machine and starting from scratch again, initiating the media creation setup tool, and also just make sure that your USB thumb drive is plugged in tightly. Anyhow, at this point we can click finish, and it's going to say taking a few minutes. That could pop up on the screen for a while or could disappear pretty fast. The next thing I want to go over is of course the drivers, aka the software that's going to be the middleman between your operating system and your hardware. And so you could potentially install Windows 11 with no drivers, and it will set generic drivers or the base drivers that Windows has for your hardware. However, results may vary for performance. The big thing that I'd recommend doing is going to your computer's vendor's website. If it's one that was purchased, then you can just look up the model on the machine itself and then just do a Google search for that. Or if it's a machine that you built, then generally you probably understand the hardware that is in your machine, so you would want to look up your motherboard manufacturer and model, download the drivers that you need for that, and your graphics card, and any other things that you may have added to your machine you would download the drivers for. This is a Lenovo desktop that was purchased pre-built, and so in my case, I could, for just an example, I could open up my web browser, and then I could just go into the URL section and I can type in lenovo.com. And like I said, this is just an example. I'm just going to go to support, PC, view PC support, and then I can type in the model that I have. This is an M720Q, and then I can just go to downloads, manual update, and then I can choose from the list of drivers that are available here. It also has the filter to select which operating system I have to further filter things out here to make it easier. And then you can just download what you need here. To kind of show you what I do, I'll go into my drivers folder here that I've already pre-downloaded everything. And I like to, first off, create the folders ahead of time. And so I also set a number, and that's kind of the priority that I use to install all these drivers. And so I always start off with the chipset very first. Number 2 is the Intel Management Engine, which is going to be dependent on if your device actually has it or not. With this being more of a business class computer, it has the Intel Management Engine driver, so that's why I have this here. There's also a storage driver, the NIC, aka Network Interface Card, aka your Ethernet. If you had wireless, then I'd probably put wireless as number 5 instead of graphics, and then you'd put your wireless driver in. And so for me, this doesn't have wireless, so I have number 5 as being for the graphics, aka GPU or video card. And then finally, 6 is going to be my audio. So the key thing that I really like to do is download those drivers before you do anything, because otherwise it could be a little more difficult to try to do things after the fact, especially if it's your only machine and you don't have wireless or network drivers at all to actually be able to reach out to the internet and download those drivers after the fact. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop open this PC here. I'm going to pop open the thumb drive, and I'm just going to stash by copying and pasting this folder right onto the thumb drive here. and anything that pops up, I'm just gonna do this for all current, and yes. And of course, once again, depending on the size of the files, the speed of your USB thumb drive, and the USB interface that you have it plugged into, everything is going to vary for speed. All right, with that copied over, let's close out of this. The next big thing is going to be getting your computer to actually boot off of the USB thumb drive. Unfortunately, all machines are different, and you do have a few options. One is that you can attempt to use Windows to boot into the recovery mode, which would allow you to select the USB thumb drive to boot from. And so let me show you how to do that now. So if we go to Start, Settings, Update and Security, Recovery on the left, and you can choose Advanced Startup here. And I'll go through the steps of just doing this just to show it. So we'll do Restart now. Of course, make sure to keep your USB thumb drive plugged in before you do this. And it's going to come up with this. And so it's going to show use a device, use a USB drive, network connection, or Windows Recovery DVD. So if we click this, then I can just select generic USB device and then just give it some time as it has to read from the thumb drive. And so this was one method to get into this. I'm going to show the alternative method, which is sometimes a little more difficult or sometimes a little bit easier if this first method fails. So the second, what I'd consider sometimes more difficult method, is that every manufacturer for the machine is different as far as the boot order key might be on the machine. Some machines, it could be the F2 key that you have to mash at the startup screen. So in my case, Lenovo splash screen that pops up, and you've got to mash the specific key that you want in order to get into the boot order or boot device. So it could be F2, could be F6, could be F8, could be F9, F10, F12, delete key if you have a Microsoft Surface. It may involve having to hold the power button and the volume down or volume up button at the same exact time for it to boot into the boot device setting. So for mine, being a Lenovo machine, it's F12. So if I go and restart my machine, and then as soon as I see the manufacturer's splash screen here, I will start mashing the F12 key and just keep mashing it. You may even get error beeps from your computer as it's getting angry, thinking that there's a stuck key. And in my case, I will use the down arrow on my keyboard to move down to the USB hard disk drive and then the generic USB device here. And I'll just hit enter. And just be patient as it has to read from the thumb drive, which is of course drastically slower than a hard drive is, to pull up the installation media. All right, we are at the beginning section here of the Windows setup. And so generally a lot of this is going to be auto-populated if you kept that box check that said use the recommended installation of Windows 11. However, one thing I do want to note here, and this is completely optional, but there's a few tricks that I'm going to show during the entire install setup. One of these tricks is at this screen here to effectively debloat Windows 11 so that the start menu doesn't have all that garbage in it, like TikTok and Clipchamp and all that stuff, which of course can be put on after the fact. But if you don't want all this stuff cluttering up your start menu, this is going to be your kind of hidden trick here. Under time and currency format, set to English United States, which is where I am. However, if I click this and I do English World, and then I can keep the keyboard as is, this here, so all of those apps that are on the start menu are dependent on where you are in the world. And of course, different countries have different laws and all that good stuff into how things can be placed on your machine. So this here effectively makes it so that it will just say, okay, just to be safe, I'm not going to put any of that stuff on the machine. So let's hit next here, install now, give it a moment as setup is starting, and then we accept the user agreement and hit next. For this section here, I am going to do custom install Windows only advanced. Let's click this. However, one thing to note is that you can technically do an in-place upgrade of Windows 11 using this as well. However, like I said, I strongly recommend if you're doing an upgrade from Windows 10 to 11, my recommendation is to just do a clean install. Don't do an in-place upgrade. So just back up your data, all that good stuff before you even hit this point. So let's select the custom install Windows only. And then it's going to show your drives and also the partitions of the drives. And so I only have one drive in this machine, which is a 500 gig SSD drive. And so the first drive always shows up as drive 0. And then if you had another drive, then you'd see drive 1, 2, 3, and so on. So the first thing we need to do is we need to clean this all up so that everything will be nice and sparkly clean for the new OS install here. So I'm going to go right down the line and I'm going to select all these partitions. And of course, before I hit OK here, this is kind of a final point. If there is any data on your machine, make sure you backed it up before we even start on this. If you didn't back it up, you can hit cancel here. You can click the X. It's going to say, are you sure you want to quit? You can hit yes. And then just rinse and repeat from the point in the video of me getting into the Windows 11 installation portion. So I'm just going to hit no for this, but we will go through, basically warning us that the data is going to be deleted in this partition. We can hit OK, and you'll see a section shows up as unallocated space. And I'm just going to keep going down the partition numbers here, deleting these. Now everything is in one big blob of unallocated space. That looks fine. And now we can select new and I can apply it. Of course, it's a 500 gig drive, but with how formatting and all that good stuff works, it has a little bit of a sacrifice and all the marketing stuff. But anyhow, we'll hit apply, hit OK, and now it's going to just build the partitions that it needs here. And then we will select next. Another thing is you could also skip the format portion and just hit next, but I just wanted to show that it is going to recreate some partitions here. So we'll just hit next, and now you just be patient and let it crunch along. And the machine may reboot a few times as it goes through the whole installation process. And we're just getting ready. This could take some time as it's effectively trying to set up a whole bunch of stuff, including base drivers. And I'll just give it some time to keep working its magic here. If you get this something went wrong section here, this could be because we set the English global region, and so we can skip this for right now. However, if you didn't see that, then you would be at this section right here. So this gives you an option to change up your keyboard layout. In my case, I'm going to leave this as is, so hit yes. Do I want to add a second keyboard layout? You can do add layout if you want to. I'm just going to skip this. It's going to do checking for updates, and then your computer may restart. And then give it some time for it to resolve your network. Sometimes I found it can hang on the screen for a while. Just be patient. Sometimes, unfortunately, Microsoft may block you from continuing on with the installation of Windows 11 if it just cannot find a network at all. Sometimes the best thing to do is just to plug in a generic USB NIC if you run into that issue. So anyhow, we'll just hit continue here or next. And it'll give you the option to name your machine, or you can skip it for now and it will give you a generic name. However, this is really the best opportunity to name it. I'm just going to name this Hubert because why not? We'll hit next. It's going to go through some more setup processes here. And then let's hit next again for this screen here. The screen goes black. It's probably because the graphic driver was installing. I found sometimes what you have to do is try to get your mouse cursor over into the right hand area here just to click on one of these options. Just kind of keep clicking around. Should bring the option back into view. It's just a weird quirk I've seen. Anyhow, as far as your choice here, for the most part, people will be setting it up as personal use. However, if you are on a domain, then you would select this option. I believe, because I'm installing Windows 11 Pro, I believe for the Home Edition, it doesn't even give this option here because Home does not allow you to set it up on a domain. So anyhow, for today's purposes, we are going to set up for personal use, and we will hit next. And then it's going to essentially force you to sign into a Microsoft account here. And I'm going to show another little trick here. So if you do not want to sign in with a Microsoft account and have everything on the machine kind of bound to the account, let me show you this little trick here. Type in no@thankyou.com and hit next. Enter just anything for a password. It can just be gibberish. Hit sign in. It's going to say, oops, something went wrong. And then it's going to force us to create a local account on this machine. So I will just set up as user and hit next. And of course, you still have the option that you could go back and set up to an online Microsoft account. But I just wanted to show this little trick here. For the purpose of this video, I will not set a password. However, I strongly recommend you do. We'll hit next. And then it's going to give you the option of privacy settings here. I usually keep location on. Of course, all this is optional. You could turn it all off or just leave it all on. However, location, I'm going to leave on. Find my device, I'll turn off. I'll scroll down here. Diagnostic data, set to only required only. Inking and typing, no. Tailored experiences, no. Advertising ID, no. Make sure we got it all. So like I said, this is all optional here. You can pick and choose whatever you want here. This is kind of my default. I'll hit accept, be patient as it checks for updates, and just be patient as it configures your profile here. So immediately as it starts up here, the start menu will be right in our face. And one thing to note is that it is nice and clean without all the bloat on it, like I said, with TikTok and Netflix and all that good stuff. One thing to mention about all those is even if the shortcuts are here, the applications themselves aren't actually installed. You would have to click on it first for it to actually initiate a download and install of the app. So it more or less just debloats it as far as just not having all that clutter there. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's click on the desktop here to get rid of the start menu. I'm just going to fine tune a few things here just to make this easier to see. And of course, all this is completely optional, but since I'm pretty old school as far as my Windows environments go, I want things to look as Windows 10 based as I can. So let's click on the taskbar down here, right click on it, click on taskbar settings. First thing I'm going to do, like I said, this is all optional, but I'm going to get rid of the search box. Task view, I don't want. Widgets, turn off. Chat, turn off. Next, we'll scroll down on taskbar behaviors. Let's click on this, scroll down again. Taskbar alignment, I'm going to set it to the old school left-hand corner. Now it's down here. You can keep it as center if you really wanted to, and then we can close out of this for right now. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my display resolution. Generally, it automatically adjusts it on your machine. However, since I'm using a special PiKVM device to actually show this all off, it can't determine what the native resolution is supposed to be, so I'm going to force it. So I'm just going to right-click here on the desktop background, display settings, maximize this, and I'm going to change this to 1920 by 1080, which is what the setting should be. Keep changes. That looks a lot better now. Another thing I'm going to do real quick is just get into personalization. I'm just going to set it to this here. You can, of course, go through and select your background, your colors, all that good stuff to set it so it's like a dark theme and things like that. But this is an easier way just to do that, and then you can kind of change things after the fact and fine-tune them how you like it. Another thing we need to do is if you did the optional step of changing it to English Global, we want to set it to the proper locale of where this machine is. Otherwise, weird things can happen and you may experience errors. So if we go over on the left-hand side and select time and language, language and region, and then for region, country, or region, let's change this to the country that you're in. I'm just going to select United States, and now we can close out of this. One thing I'm going to do real quick is I am going to click on the start menu, and I'm going to pin Edge to the taskbar. And I'm also going to pin File Explorer to the taskbar. These may or may not already be on your taskbar if you didn't select the optional region locale that we adjusted during the install setup. The other thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to get rid of the Xbox app there so things will be nice and clean here. Next, I am going to click on File Explorer, and we're going to hunt down the thumb drive. So I'm going to click on this PC, or I could have clicked the thumb drive here, but I just want to show it off here. So here is the thumb drive. Let's pop this open and let's go ahead and copy the drivers to the desktop. I'm just going to expand that out to show all the magic happening here. And next, let's go ahead and install all the drivers that your machine needs. So I'm just going to pop open the folder here, and I'm just going to go through the step of just installing one of the drivers just so that you can see what it's supposed to kind of look like. Kick off the chipset driver and the contents for the executable here. Yes for this, and I accept. Next, I'm just going to select install for that. That's fine, and install. It's got a little another setup window here. We'll just install for that, and that is finished. So I'll hit finish and finish again. So that driver is now ready to go. I'm not going to go through and show all these, but at the moment I'm going to install all of them, and then once all the drivers are installed, we'll come back and we'll continue on with the setup processes here. If at any point during the driver installation process that you did not get the pop-up asking to reboot at all, I would recommend just rebooting your computer just before we begin with the next steps here. So next, let's do a little more fine-tuning here of the computer. These are, of course, once again, all optional, but I want to show them off here. So if we go down into the bottom right here, you're going to have a few options here. First thing is that Microsoft Teams automatically starts, and the way that we can actually turn that off as being one less application to start with the machine is if we right-click on the taskbar, go to Task Manager, and then over here you'll have your startup apps, and then in here, I'll just maximize this, and in here we can disable applications that are automatically queued to either fire up or not fire up during the startup process. And so this can decrease the startup time of your machine, and it can also just decrease all the stuff that's running in the background for eating up battery life and CPU cycles. So what I like to do is for Microsoft Edge, I actually like to disable it, and OneDrive, disable as well. Like I said, this is all optional, but this is kind of what I like to disable. And then also Microsoft Teams, let's disable that as well. And we can close out of that. We'll go back into the system tray here. Teams is still running, but that will not be showing up the next time it reboots, and the same goes for OneDrive. Let's click on the Windows Security shield here that has the exclamation. So of course it's asking us to sign into the Microsoft account, and so this is another opportunity that if you didn't sign in but you want to sign in, you can click here. We'll hit dismiss for this. Set up OneDrive. This would automatically usually resolve if we signed into the account here. You can also just click on Set up OneDrive and continue with that process, which effectively makes it that you have to sign in with your Microsoft account anyhow. So we'll just hit dismiss for this, and we can close out of that. And now the shield down here should be happy with the green check, so that's fine. Next, the big thing is going to be patching Windows 11 so that it has bug fixes and security fixes. So let's go to Start, Settings. If you have the pop-up that says Windows isn't activated, we can go ahead and activate that now. Then we can click on Troubleshoot if it gives us an error here, in which case it is now happy. And so let's go to Windows Update. The first thing I like to do before I do this, and once again, all this is optional. For one, if you want to stay up to date with the absolute latest available updates of features and all that good stuff, we can toggle this on. The other thing we can do is we can go to Advanced Options. Let's click on this. I recommend selecting this to receive updates for other Microsoft products. Get Me Up to Date is really nice in the fact that if you need to walk away, or at least patching the machine on the very first attempt, just to make sure that it reboots if you need to walk away, you can toggle this. Download updates over metered connections. I like to toggle this on even if I don't have a metered connection. I just want to make sure that I am getting my updates. You can also make it so that it notifies me when a restart is required to finish updating, and I like to turn that on. Once again, this is all optional, but we'll turn these all on for the sake of this video. Let's go back, top left, and then let's do check for updates. The speed of checking for updates is completely dependent on your network speed and your hardware, and of course this is also the very first time we are checking for updates, so it's going to take longer as it needs to do its checks and balances into what updates we have and which ones we don't have. So we'll let it download and crunch here. One thing to note is sometimes you'll see where the restart now shows up, but it's actually actively installing. If you hit restart now, it should continue installing this, but I'm pretty old school and I like to make sure that this stuff is actually done before I hit the restart. So I'll just leave this be here, and I'll just continue to make sure that everything that says pending install is flipped to hopefully pending restart. At some point, if you didn't click on the restart now, then the machine should have started to restart on its own if you had all the options checked that we had set, and then we just wait patiently as it crunches along here. Alright, so just a few things now that the Windows updates are complete. Just want to show you some quick ways of keeping the machine nice and fresh besides just making sure that your Windows updates are kept up to date. Alright, so one other area that a lot of people I think kind of skip over is disk cleanup, and this is just a tool that is built into Windows if you've never used it before. And this is a great way to every month or every 2 months or so just to go ahead and run through the processes of cleaning up junk that builds up on the machine. And so we go down to Start, type in disk, and then here's disk cleanup here. One thing I actually like to do is open file location and then right click on it, show more options, create shortcut. It's going to say can't do it here, but that's fine. We'll hit yes and it will toss it right on the desktop for us. The other thing is when we go to initiate it, the key thing is to run it as an administrator, otherwise it won't find everything. Even if you are an administrator on the machine, running it as an administrator is the key. So I'll just left click just to highlight it once, we'll right click on it, hit run as administrator, and then I'll just check everything in here. And then with everything checked, you can see the amount of data that you'll gain here. We'll just hit OK and delete files, and then just let it crunch, and it could take some time. Anyhow, that's all you need to do to install Windows 11 23H2. I hope you found this video to be useful. If you did, please like it and make sure to subscribe to my channel to see all my new stuff as it releases. I would greatly appreciate it. I also invite you to explore my channel's other videos if you have not done so already. Lots of interesting project videos and many more to come. Anyhow, until next time, take it easy.